on? Am I audible? All right. Thinks I can hear my own voice, so I think I'm good enough. So at the outset, thank you all so much for coming down. Innovfest Unbound, I think for me, this event epitomizes both innovation and the limitless possibilities of technological innovation. And I think at the outset, what I'm really fortunate to do is to have these gentlemen here discuss what's very futuristic. Because to be a soothsayer or predict the future is foolhardy because it's impossible. And I think as far as predicting the future goes, Isaac Asimov in 1964, one of the best science fiction authors, was at the World's Fair in New York, and he made predictions of what he saw 50 years into the future. That is 2014. And what he predicted was things like the microwave or faceless conversations coming through, and today we take that for granted. So when we're talking about smart cities, it's about a picture into the future. And not many remember, many of you do remember the famous cartoon Jetsons that spoke about flying cars and robotic household assistants, as well as holograms, and all of which are coming through in different stages. So this is a vision of the future of cities, and smart cities essentially is the future. So at the outset, I want to introduce the esteemed panel I have with me. I have Paul from Huawei, thank you so much. I have Gordon from Schneider Electric. I have Chris from Autodesk, and I have Steve from PropertyGuru. So I'm going to get right to the meat of the action. We're in Singapore, and Singapore launched its Smart Nation Drive in 2014, and is on a quest to become the world's first smart nation. And I think while there's no gold standard of what a city should be, I would say Singapore sort of is leading the conversation of smart nation, especially on IT connectivity and urban and sanitation. So would you say Singapore is sort of the forefront of this innovation right now?
So perhaps maybe I'll lead off and we'll carry around this way. But I think the first question everybody asks is, so what's a smart city? Gordon and I were just chatting about this in the corner, and everybody here in the audience will have a different opinion, but I'm pretty sure that the target is sustainability and quality of life, right? That's what it's about. We inherit the planet, and the planet may not make it, if you understand our meaning. So then let's look at the components. So where are we here, and if that's the target? And what's Singapore, and you heard the Minister and also Mr. Tan giving concepts that the Singapore government through regulatory policy as well as execution programs, and it's focused around the heart of smart, which is intelligence. AI.Sing is an example. And the core requirement is analytics. And to have analytics, you need to connect everything. So that's why I think the panelists here, you've got guys from different layers, from software layer, from architecture, from property, and from platform. So the future, to get to smart city, really needs the foundation. The foundation has got to be based on analytics, which is collecting data from people, behavior of objects, behavior of things, and then the correlation of this, so that we do the right things. So it's not just about turning on light switches or having an autonomous car and those sorts of things, or robots. If you listen to the Harvard Business School, there are two schools of thought. Harvard says robots will not replace humans, so we shouldn't be worried. And then you have Stephen Hawking and others who say, AI is the death of the planet. I tend to err on the left side.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. I want to go around and get perspectives as well. Gordon, I want to come to you. You've seen the smart city initiative around the globe. Apart from Singapore, the conversation has been spoken about in Dubai and Barcelona and other places with rapid urbanization. So how is this phenomenon of smart city developing globally, and what sort of differences have you seen in different corners of the globe, from Europe to North America to Asia?
I think it's driven by a number of factors in a sense, and many of them are classic government-driven factors, which is, yes, everybody knows there's the pressures of urbanization and migration, etc. But a lot of the time, the cities around the world are looking at smart cities more from the point of view of doing more with less, because their budgets aren't bigger. And if you look at Barcelona, which has been famous for a smart city program for probably 7 or 8 years now, out of 3,000 staff, they only ever had 3 people working on the smart city. The rest of the 3,000 people were basically collecting the rubbish and making sure that the city ran correctly and everything worked. So to a certain extent, cities around the world are responding often from competition, because if that city's doing it, well, we'd better do it. So, there's different motivations in a sense.
Well, Chris, I wanted to get your perspective on this because we talk about smart city. It's very fascinating because there's a physical component of physical infrastructure as well as a technological component. And in Asia, while Singapore is part of ASEAN, it's also very different because on one hand you have Singapore's technological sophistication, on the other hand you have places like Laos which is still catching up. So can we see both physical infrastructure as well as the technological infrastructure coming up simultaneously, or does the physical infrastructure need to be in place before technological implementation of smart city can come about?
I think at Autodesk, we provide tools for people to design, imagine, and create a better world. And as a software platform, you can realize that it's actually not limited by physical platform. So we have clients in third world country that is using our technology to develop very smart building. And this is not just isolated to Southeast Asia. We have customers in Europe, America who are using the same technology. So I can vouch for the fact that design platform is not limited by physical technology, right? And with the power of cloud, and to Paul's point, we can do a lot of the computational simulation analysis or even virtual reality processing over the cloud. So it is coming to the point whereby technology is no longer limited by how much you can invest in the hardware.
Right. Well, Steve, I wanted to get your perspective on this in the sense that we heard about smart city through terminologies of big data and IoT, and of course, this is really great from a government public policy perspective, from private sector perspective, but what does it mean to the person hearing these stories? I mean, they hear these stories, but sometimes they don't fully understand it. So you've seen that from your business now going in the smart city way. What should the consumer outside understand about this phenomenon?
Yeah, I guess smart cities. We see Singapore doing a lot around the smart city in terms of investing in technology and having a long-term roadmap in terms of where the country should evolve to, and reviewing that on a 5 to 10 year basis. We've also seen a big investment around the region in technology, and that's shaped, been an enabler for the way in which people can actually now make decisions around where the home should be. And so, so smartphones, for example, being prevalent across everywhere in all of the markets we operate in. We have 23 million people every month who are looking for property now. And what we've done is use some of this technology, not just for technology's sake, but also just to really help the people. Because at the end of the day, finding your home is really around your lifestyle, it's around your community and this kind of thing. So when you think about, finding your home, what do you think about, and how can we make that easier? And so we've used technology such as drone footage to be able to see what it's like living on a 60th floor versus a 30th floor versus a 20th floor. We're working with property developers across the region to be able to customize your own property and also do online booking now. So technology exists to allow you to do that. Virtual reality, we allow the customers to be able to immerse themselves and actually see the home and experience living in the home rather than just a one-dimensional perspective. And the Smart Nation technology enables that basically.
Right. Well, Paul and Gordon, I want to get your perspectives on this because from following smart city at a very global level, we've spoken about the US for many years as being the gold standard as far as innovation is concerned, especially with Silicon Valley. But yet so far, the smart city initiatives are sort of driven now by Asia in terms of Singapore and Dubai. I mean, has the West or the US sort of fallen behind, or what about other Western megapolises like London and Paris, which at one point were economic powerhouses? And right now, are they leading the conversation at all in smart city, or are they playing catch up? So,
You want to take
Will you start?
So I'll speak together because I think we share sort of a common theme here. Let's be very clear. If you want it to be smart, it must all be connected. Okay? There's a premise for that. And then you need to understand the behaviour. So since you've mentioned about Asia specifically, and let's take and Barcelona. We all go to Mobile World Congress, and I think everybody knows the queues you have to stand in order to get your badge. Sorry, did we not have one here as well? I think so. I can't remember.
I think so.
But as an example, what do we do in Huawei? We have meetings similar in size to this. You'd be surprised. There, 200,000 people. That's a lot. So imagine a meeting. We don't sign in. We don't have books. It's all facial recognition. Okay, it's all facial recognition. You could do that. Let's take Barcelona specifically. They have initiatives very specific to waste management. You just need to walk outside and you see all the bins are overflowing with rubbish, as an example, yes? So we have smart initiatives and we have the right intentions, but it's the execution that always lets down anybody with these concepts of smart. So, and you're quite right, Gordon. One country does it and says, I've got a smart city, and it's a catfish effect, you know, the Chinese style. Then everybody wants to follow with the frenzy. So the key really is to have the right ingredients and have the right target, okay? And doing bits and pieces, personal opinion, I don't see that as being effective. You're right. People put a few people in an organisation to do something smart, but a lot of the other stuff hasn't come out, whether it's in property or the other components. The other component that is essential is a cloud. So if you don't have everything connected and you don't have the ability to do analytics, and it's not based on a cloud, so open development and everybody can participate, you're never going to have the concept of smart. And just to reinforce why I think Singapore is heading in the right direction is because of what the Minister and Mr. Tan said specifically about data scientists, investment in the future of the people with the right skills, artificial intelligence. They already know it's all cloud-based. Robotics, 3D printing, etc. They're all components of these things.
I think what you're touching on is a good point where there's piecemeal approaches.
Yes.
And then there's, shall we say, obviously a top-down kind of planned approach where they might be looking at policies, programs and projects. And one of the fundamental disconnects I seem to see around the world in this area is that you'll have one that's focusing on connectivity, but without actually knowing what they're going to do with the connectivity. So you've got Kansas City, Missouri, which has now gigabit fiber, and they've still been, for the last few years, trying to work out, well, this is great, are we just watching YouTube faster? What are we actually doing with all this connectivity? And then you go to Barcelona, and they've got some pneumatic waste collection, and then they've got some non-pneumatic waste, which is overflowing in the streets. And I won't say theirs is piecemeal because they've been doing it for a long time, but there are many cities that they get a grant from the World Bank, from the IFC, they get it from the EU, they fix something,
It's all project.
and then they fix, exactly, it's project rather than policy program projects, which is the ideal way. And so to an extent, that's actually funding because, of course, the cities don't have the money to just suddenly say, here's our wonderful vision, here's how we do it. And so that's why I think it does become piecemeal, which is a problem, but it's just the reality, I suspect.
Well, Chris, I mean, there's a lot of talk about public-private partnerships. I mean, in order to get the smart city initiative going, it's about a public-private partnership. I mean, we've also seen that private sector companies like yourselves, which have tech efficiency, coming and solving public sector constraints, you know, for mayors of Barcelona and mayors of provinces in China as well. And would you say for effective smart city initiative, both the public and the private have to sort of merge? There has to be a synergy between the two to have a successful project rolled out.
I think it's very important for PPP to provide a very conducive platform for whether it's SMEs or even entrepreneurs to participate in the smart city initiative. Just bring it back to home. Just in Fusionopolis, there's a company called Fertility, and it's actually one of the key beneficiaries from our Entrepreneurial Impact Grantee program, and also sponsorship from government. They are now providing electrical scooter, which is recharged through solar, and with all the IoT sensors, which you can actually match the demand and the supply. Next time, probably in a few months from now, when you go to One North MRT, to move around the Mediapolis areas, you don't even have to figure out how to walk. You just hop into one of these scooters and you can ride around. So this is possible because of the partnership of government and private enterprises like Autodesk. So this is a very important program. And the other one you probably see in the stadiums, right? And a lot of the big projects that's happening in Singapore, PPP is definitely one of the key empowerment for companies to actually make big decisions.
Well, of course, you know, Steve, you've seen your business transform from the time you co-founded it to where it is now, and we live in a very disrupt or be disruptive model. And as Smart Nation and Smart City takes place, how have you innovated? You mentioned about how people are benefiting from Smart City to the property thing, but from a business perspective, how do you adapt as, you know, the external forces around you adapt as well to stay not just relevant but competitive and 2 steps ahead?
Yeah, I think from our business point of view, you know, obviously, how do we stay competitive? You stay competitive by relying on good quality talent, and you know, what we find reassuring about someone like Singapore, for example, is the focus on talent. And there's clearly a an awareness that in order to evolve, to become more of a smart nation, you need to change your skill set. You're moving from more of a manufacturing to more knowledge to more data and technology-driven country. And that requires a different change in thinking, both in terms of talent, but also in terms of how you think about developing properties, for example. So increasingly you're seeing the rise of what's happened in the past is you've had an industrial property area zoned, a factory area zoned, or a HDB area zoned, etc., for example, in Singapore. But what increasingly is happening is you start to have more integrated, so you can actually have destinations. And so how do you start to plan for that, for example, because that's obviously a combination of 3 or 4 different zones. And so that requires obviously a different level of thinking as well. So the other challenge, I guess, we see is that whilst obviously Singapore and the markets around us continue to evolve, consumer expectations also continue to evolve, and the consumer expectations get set by what they're doing in the rest of their life. And if you're waking up and you want to order a taxi that arrives within 30 seconds, you want to download a movie and watch a movie straight away, any movie. You want to have a more personalized preferences and this kind of thing. This is what shapes consumers' lives, and technology is allowing that to shape people's lives. And therefore, when it comes to a government, for example, thinking about smart nation, when it comes to a business like ours thinking about smart nation, that shapes consumer expectations. So increasingly, that becomes almost the competition for both businesses and also consumers.
Right. Well, we touched a bit about urbanization, because smart city is all about urbanization. And as we sit here in the Marina Bay Sands, this is also built on reclaimed land. And for major other global cities like New York or London, when things get expensive, you can live on the on the city fringes or on the outskirts. But you can't possibly do that in Singapore. I mean, you can, but you're probably living in JB, which is another country. So how can we expand, build for the future? And because as part of Smart Nation is also constant expansion, how do we expand building for the future? Is there thought around, expanding a city with, beyond the city limit in a very constructive manner?
If I'm not mistaken, I think we already mapped out the 2,000 cities in the world that will be smart, so we already know which ones they're going to be. Yeah? So I don't think that's the issue. Perhaps I'd like to answer the question in a slightly different way, coming back to what Chris was saying, and that's about this PPP model and the reason for this conference and how this type of problem could be addressed in a broader community. And we launched an i5 lab here in Singapore, which is about innovation, incubation, integration, internationalisation, founded on an IoT platform. But coming back to what the Minister and the theme of Innovfest and Unbound is, and having partners, large corporations and lots of small, innovative companies here, I mean, it's the disruptive ability of this that can make that happen, okay? Policymakers can't do that. No initiative will make that happen, okay? It will not. It's putting, micro-innovation, creating the right sort of climate that allows the disruption to create a benefit. And the benefit's either benefit for society or a business benefit, because that's where the money comes from. So I would look at this concept of, how to address urbanisation through this concept of collaborative initiatives, yes? And that needs to be on a global scale, because what works in Singapore may not work in Dubai or in Barcelona. It just physically will not. There are many other pressures, and it's difficult culturally to move these things across. So I would use forums like this, more of them, not just to talk about the concepts, but for these 350 small companies out here that come up with lots of different ideas to challenge us, to work with us, to use the scale of companies like the Huaweis, the Schneiders and the others, to be able to take these type of concepts in innovation to the world, because that's when we make a difference. Otherwise, Singapore may become smart, but as soon as you cross the strait, you have other challenges, yes?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that as well, Gordon. I mean, we're talking about rapid urbanization, and more than half of the world lives in cities, and that is increasing at estimated 1 to 2% every year. So that is heading towards the future. In a very complicated model, as Paul touched upon it, like in ASEAN, where we have got Singapore is a very sophisticated model, but the others around are still developing in various stages. How do we sort of develop smart cities in a uniform manner, just so that one region is not too developed and the other region is not too underdeveloped, because we all depend on regional trade. So the more the countries are equal, or in terms of development and economic prosperity, do we see that there's better, trade relations, better foreign policy relations? So how do we sort of, the smart nation, how is it more, homogeneous? How is it more pervasive across the globe?
Again, it comes back to the motivations, but something Paul was touching on was very much about PPP models, which are really well executed in Singapore, because governments generally got cash, so they actually partner well. Whereas PPP in the rest of the world means government has no money, and they then expect the private sector to kind of step in and pay. So kind of as Paul was touching on again with a forum like this, and getting people to actually start to discuss really the strategies for implementation, because government can't do everything top down. If you think about it, in smart cities, really the government's role in any country is really to put in place an enabling framework for the private sector to carry out the government's policies. So it's not a matter of the governments and the cities in every part of the world saying, well, here's what we're going to do and let's go and do it. It's actually saying, here's our policies. How do we get the private sector incentivized to do that? And that's generally where a lot of the cities and the governments fall down. Often it's jurisdictional, where you've got cities that don't actually have all of the regulatory powers they need to put that framework together, because they might be very limited in size. Most cities are small, and really the cities are bigger than the municipal boundaries. Whereas Singapore, obviously, we have a natural advantage here. It's a city-state, so everything is kind of within the one jurisdiction, so it's nice. But Barcelona had a great offer some years ago from a multinational who said, we'll go and provide district heating as a service. And Barcelona said, fabulous. But then they found out, well, actually, we don't own all of the conduit and we don't own all of the bits we need. Sorry, can't do it. Yeah.
Chris, just touching again on the PPP model, I mean, you mentioned since Autodesk, you've sort of seen the transformation in Singapore, from back in the early days in the 60s and 70s to where we are now and to where we're projecting in the future. Touching on the PPP model, of course, Singapore has got a very effective public-private partnership, but of course, the model that works in Singapore can't be uniform across the globe, so there's no one gold standard as such. So how do we, what can other nations replicate from the Singapore model, but also understand development within their own constraints?
I think we have seen Singapore as like the benchmark indirectly when we talk about Singapore. Unfortunately, outside this country, the disparity can be very different. I think all the executives on the table would feel the same way if you do like business in Southeast Asia alone. But I would like to say that there are many things that Singapore does provide as a learning ground. Just case in point, just across one-off, there's a Block 77. I hope you have been there before. The level of incubation that is happening there is unprecedented. And if you have the chance to go there, whether you are a one, two-man show, you can go there and apply for a space to create your products. And then there will be VCs that will come on a regular basis for you to present your ideas. So this is also supported by the ecosystem of very advanced tertiary institutions, whether it's NUS, whether NUS medical facility, in all around the area. So smart city is not just about buildings, it's not just about physical technology. FinTech, you can see the level of enthusiasm that's happening in that facility is very astounding when I look across the building, right? You've seen people come and go, and believe me, people outside are looking at Singapore like a learning role model, right? But whether they can replicate what Singapore does, I think it's not fair, because there's never a apple-to-apple comparison with regards to how Singapore evolved, right? Singapore is a small state, and we are privileged enough to have a very conducive environment to grow. But I can assure you, whether it's Malaysia, which I just finished a conference last week, like Malaysia Digital Economy Corp, they are bringing the best developers into one room and trying to figure out a solution to leapfrog the productivity problem that they have in the construction industry. Just to give you a feel, in totality, in construction industry, we spend about 1.2% on technology, relative to manufacturing, which is about 3%. So that's how far the gap is. So this is where we are going to have to learn, and the government around the region or the private sector around the region have to take leadership role, partnering with technology companies like Huawei or Schneider or even PropertyGuru to leapfrog the capability.
Well, Steve,
I
just,
would, I would agree with that. I think, just speaking with, I guess I'm a little bit in between the startup community and I guess the corporate community. But when we started the business 9 years ago in Singapore, the whole startup scene was very, very different. And in fact, it was non-existent. The investment community in terms of early stage venture capital, tech was non-existent. M&A, venture funds, etc., were not really here. And the startup scene was not really here. And if we look at how the whole ecosystem has evolved over the last 7 or 8 years, it's just been transformational. Both in terms of getting VCs in, tech, US and Chinese tech companies to come in and invest heavily, to just see the whole startup scene just burgeoning out of nothing. It's very encouraging, and I think this is driven by just joined up thinking, and I think the government thankfully here has a joined up thinking, has ability to do that maybe because it's a bit of a smaller country, but has ability to have a little bit of joined up thinking between the various departments. It doesn't act in silos, and basically that transcends all ministers pretty much coherently talking around disruption and using disruption as the burning platform now to make the investments around fintech, to make the investments around biotech, to really try and disrupt things. And for me, there's been a real, whilst there are two sides of the story around, for example, education, and education is a key issue in terms of talent, obviously. What's been encouraging for me as building my business here is that there is, first of all, a recognition of there needs to be something, because there's a surplus of talent in one sector, a massive shortage in another sector, and there's a lot of dialogue going on at minister level talking about how do we actually cater for that, and this is really, really encouraging. There is also, I don't think the solution is quite there yet, but you're now seeing the emergence of, for example, homeschooling. I know there's a group of 80 couples who are now doing homeschooling in Singapore, mostly Singaporeans, who are now taking their kids off and doing homeschooling. So they're actually creating their own solution to the problem.
Well, Steve, I just want to touch on that as well, because we mentioned about entrepreneurship and Block 77. When we talk about smart nation or smart city, it's always driven by, say, public sector as well as leading private sector or Fortune 500 companies or tech giants. What about for entrepreneurship, being an entrepreneur yourself, being an entrepreneur today in the smart city era, how can we sort of cultivate entrepreneurship to be smart city focused? What can we do to make smart city focused entrepreneurs? Is that even, I'm sure that's in phases right now.
Sorry, to make it smart city.
Yeah, like how should entrepreneurship, is there entrepreneurship 2.0 in the smart city phase, because do we move smart cities away from public sector and leading private sector companies to have entrepreneurs also lead the conversation?
Well, I think it's kind of been touched on before. I think the government needs to act as an enabler and make sure that enabling platforms and systems and services are there, and then basically get out of the way. Encourage and be willing to accept disruption, be willing to consider and accept people, challenging the norm. So these are the key enablers. And of course, education will form a part of that. But just by building and supporting the ecosystem here, when you've seen it, as I've said before, grow significantly over the last 5 or 6 years, to continue to support that in the way it has will be one way. To talk about disruption, to enable disruption, to put in place joined up thinking will be the way. But also just to get out of the way. And make sure that the private sector can then disrupt and create businesses which ultimately large corporates will not be able to do, because inherently it's around protecting and managing the risk. Startups' view is completely opposite. How do I maximize my risk and disrupt as hell as possible? And so the two can coexist. But I think enabling the startup and tech scene through bringing being flexible in terms of talent, providing the technology platform to make it easy to set up a businesses, which all happens here, is a start, and which is why you get so many small, medium, and large companies, both in the technology sector and also in the institutional finance sector, coming in and investing very heavily here. But of course, we're not standing alone here either. Whilst we're doing this in Singapore, and we spend. I have businesses in five of the 6 big ASEAN countries. I see the same thing happening in Vietnam. I see the same thing happening in Thailand. I see the same thing happening. So the rest of the world's not standing still either. So you just got to carry on and do it faster, basically.
Well, just coming back to where I started, one of Isaac Asimov's predictions back in 1964, he said robots will be in existence neither for common good nor for bad, but they will be in existence, and spot on about that. So we have AI and automation, and that's a central part of smart city. But also with AI and automation, there's a threat of job displacement. So can we actually be a smart city with jobs displacements?
think your minister and Mr. Tan, I keep coming back to them because I'm trying to realign, right? Made it very clear, data scientists, what will robots do? What can robots not do? What would humans prefer to do? And what would humans prefer or cannot do? And I think if you segment the capability this way, I think it's my mic, right? If you segment the market this way, then you probably find out precisely where robots will not take. They won't dream and they won't create. So, I'm not going to play football. I'm not going to watch them play football, I don't think. It's okay. Good.
Just on a final note, I think we're almost out of time. Just to get a little more profoundly philosophical about this, I think smart city beyond technology. What is this really smart city beyond technology? Because Singapore's success story was there even before technology and smart city. So just on a final note, if I could go around, what's your vision of a smart city beyond the technology? What really makes a city smart?
Sustainability, future, right?
All right, good.
Quality of life.
I think doing more with less and doing it astutely. Smart cities should be like sustainability in that you don't go and do something because you can. The most efficient, the most greenest piece of concrete is the concrete you don't pour. So if you don't need to build something and you can do something smart, in the sense of passive design kind of, you should do that.
Chris?
Technology cannot be smart if we don't have smart people behind the technology, right? And to echo Paul's comment about jobs, some jobs will be gone, new jobs will be created. And just like a chef, if you want to have a Michelin meal, you can't have a robot do it, right? The robot can do the repetitive task of cutting the stuff, but to prepare that dish, you still need a very skillful chef. So for us, is to embrace the smart economy, the smart cities, and the smart futures. By embracing it, we basically conquer the fear of being left out.
Steve?
Yeah, I think smart cities is much more than just technology. Why are we talking about smart cities? We're talking about smart cities because it's actually about people and it's about where they live. And it's about creating a livable city with communities who are working and living and having fun together. It's around arts, it's around culture. So providing, again, the infrastructure and the support to enable that is what's going to be important, because the world is moving at an incredibly fast pace. 65% of kids in school today under the age of 5 are going to be in jobs that don't even exist today. 60,000 jobs in the US disappeared in the retail sector in 1 month. You have to be flexible. You have to enable the system to be able to move and empower the people. But it's about being a livable city.
All right, I think on behalf of all the panelists, Paul, Gordon, Chris, and Steve, thank you all so much, and you painted a vision for the future. Let's see how much of it comes to fruition. We'll hold you to it, though. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to Akshobh and his very smart panel.